What do you imagine when you think of a rogue? Probably a sneaky thief, or a dashing scoundrel, an assassin maybe, or perhaps a mysterious figure in the corner of the tavern praying for someone to ask them about their cool backstory, about how their parents were killed and they lost all their friends so they turned to a life of crime just to survive.
That was dramatic.
And yeah, that's the stereotypical rogue, but not me. To me, rogues are boisterous, flamboyant chaos machines that demand the attention of everyone in the room. And I think D&D is to blame for that. I've never played with or played as a rogue who wasn't constantly doing things to end up as the center of attention.
I am a flaming Moltres!
The perfect example of this is the only rogue I've ever played in D&D, the one who inspired the whole aura behind this deck. The swashbuckling, NPC-killing, party item-stealing, story-derailing monstrosity of a beaverfolk rogue known as Jimmy Willikers. Before we get into the deck tech, I need to tell you a little bit about Jimmy Willikers. He was a one-shot character I played for my friend Logan's first time DMing. This was back in 2019, some friends and I got together for a weekend hangout. And for some reason, I decided to get absolutely blasted the night we were playing D&D. This resulted in me becoming pretty much the worst type of player character. And that's because every decision was backed behind a copious amount of alcohol.
You had to have one drink of beer, didn't you?
You don't understand. The liquor's calling shots now, Randy.
So they were bad decisions, to say the least. And because the universe has a sense of humor like that, I rolled incredibly well that night. The first thing I did at my character's introduction was to leap out from behind a tree stump, disarm my friend Hunter's rock gnome fighter, and steal one of his hand axes in broad daylight. Next, we went to a town, and after my one bad roll for the night, after attempting to haggle with a shopkeeper, I stabbed him, tied him up, and left him in a corner to bleed to death. Then we fought an owlbear, and I stole Hunter's other hand axe that he threw to kill it. At this point, he didn't have any weapons, so I proceeded to extort him in exchange for the axes that I had found.
What's up, buddy?
This is not funny. Why is my stuff in here?
Wow, that's weird. Ooh, $1 for a stapler, that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I'm not paying for my own stuff.
And lastly, in the final encounter, I threw a knife at the boss the party was attempting to parlay with. Now hold on 1 second. This was the voice I had chosen for Jimmy, you see. I just have one question for you, Mr. Wolf.
And what might that be?
Are you about to die?
No.
Wrong answer! The party ended up having to restrain me in the end. And so ends the tale of Jimmy Willikers. For now. I swear I'm not normally that type of player, but the power of the rogue class took over me.
Go ahead. Let that language come up out of you. Go ahead.
And as I alluded to in the cold open, Jimmy Willikers the perfect analogy for this episode's deck. We're gonna get away with a lot of shit early on, but eventually, everyone's gonna turn on us if we don't wrap things up quickly. And thankfully, for rogues, there's no other color better suited for the job than mono red. Now, rogues are a creature type that falls into the class side of the race class model of MTG creature types. The race class model is a design concept of Magic R&D that says a sapient creature should have a class along with its race.
I made it special!
That's why you're more likely to see a dwarf warrior, a vampire cleric, or an elf shaman than you are to see a dwarf, a vampire, or an elf. Those classless ones exist, they're just less common these days. And because of this, these class tribal episodes are more challenging to make than the race tribal episodes, like vampires, dragons, or elementals. And while I love the wizard episode of this series, half of the creatures are also human. And an argument could be made that at that point it's just human wizard tribal. I say this because starting from here, I have to pick these class tribes carefully as to not oversaturate them with a race creature type. But thankfully, mono red will give us plenty of options for our rogue tribal deck. Did you know there were red rogues? Because I didn't know there were red rogues. Probably because I don't play goblins.
Ew! I like them! I like goblins! Ah!
Now obviously there's more than just goblins, because otherwise I would have done all that yapping about races and classes for nothing. We've got humans, of course, via Shino, which were just eroded to lizard, jackals, vampires, and even a couple raccoons thanks to Bloomburrow. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of goblins, but they only make up about a third of our creatures this time, which is better than half of the wizard tribal deck being humans.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer.
And now for my favorite part of the series, the commander reveal. And I think we all know who would make the best option for our commander. It's the only real choice. The one, the only, Grenzo. It's Grenzo. Whenever one of our creatures deal combat damage to a player, we get to choose one of two abilities. The first is to goad a creature the defending player controls. For any new players, goad is a keyword that forces a creature to attack, but it can't attack the player that goaded it if there are other players in the game. The second option allows you to exile the top card of the defending player's library, and you can cast it until the end of your turn. That ability's fine, but the idea here is to pick the first option. Ideally, you'd have enough creatures to goad all of your opponent's creatures, or at the very least, all the creatures one opponent controls. And much like Jimmy Willikers, we're going to hit them in broad daylight, and there's not a damn thing they can do about it.
I'm gonna fight you now. Oh, are you?
This is where our support packages come in. The first of which are the rest of our cards that goad. Should an opponent start pillow forting in response to our aggressively sneaky gameplay, we can break up their defenses with these cards.
Tyson, make some room for us on the bench. Joint boy, beat the shit out of that guy.
Give your boss a tug, you tip.
That experiment worked wonderfully, buddy. Worth their weight in gold, buddy.
Next are the cards that grant menace, forcing our opponents to double block our creatures. And if you're playing against a token deck, make sure to take them out first before the menace strategy becomes useless.
Dad, I tried to go to school, but this guy won't let me.
Oh, yeah? Him and what army?
The U.S. Army.
Oh, that's a good army.
Because I can't stop myself from putting them in deck, here's some extra combat cards so you can goad even more creatures. And our last support package will be good old Unblockable. If all else fails, you can use one of these to make your rogue swing without issue.
Fight!
5? You're doing what he says.
He's very persuasive.
Truly living your best mono-red life with the experience Jimmy Willikers would want you to have. As for what creatures to run, well, you can't really go wrong here, you've got your choice of over 80 options. However, if I could make some suggestions, there are these rogues which allow other rogues to become unblockable under certain conditions. They're good in a pinch, but they're not the most reliable bunch. And there's also these rogues that will help you rummage through your deck. But what the rogue does at an individual level isn't super important. We just want them to connect so they can start goading our opponents. That said, here's a list of my top 10 rogues to include that weren't already covered in some other mechanic. So there we go, a rogue deck in the spirit of literally every rogue player in D&D. We show up, hit them in the face, start shit between everyone at the table, maybe steal an axe or two along the way, and try to kill everyone around you before they team up to stop you.
Come on! Run, run!
To the back!
Oh, you better just kill me! Shit.
The perfect representation of what rogues embody to me. I just hope that your friends are as forgiving as mine. And if not, well, then I guess you'll have first-hand experience playing that loner rogue who's a mysterious figure in the corner of the tavern with no friends and a cool backstory praying for someone to just ask about them.